All right, Job chapter 16, let's call this one Chipping Away in Their Feelings About People, which is going to go to a relatively famous quote that we will get to eventually as we discuss Job's response to Eliphaz in this chapter, where he starts off with the relatively famous passage, "Miserable comforters are you all," as he goes on to say, "Look, if my words are wind, then why are you still provoked to answer? More importantly, if you were in my position, I could use my words to snipe at you as well, but I could also use them to encourage. Moreover, whether he speaks or stays silent, his pain still remains, leaving the implication that since he still got questions, he's still going to appeal for answers." As he continues, "God has worn me out and maybe even worse, left me in the company of people who seem content to make me even more miserable." As he goes on to describe God as one who seems to be set against him as a soldier on a field of battle. However, that is not going to deter Job from concluding by the end of the chapter, roughly around verse 19, "Even now, behold, my witness is in heaven, and he who testifies for me is on high. My friends scorn me. My eye pours out tears to God, that he would argue the case of a man with God as a son of man does with his neighbor. For when a few years have come, I shall go the way from which I shall not return," seeming to make it kind of clear that Job is not convinced that he's going to get his answer before he dies. But even if he doesn't get it here, he's convinced that there's a witness in heaven that will be able to explain all of this to him and hopefully vindicate him in a situation where, once again, he still doesn't know what he's done wrong. Which reminded me of a quote that goes, "Great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, and small minds discuss people." A quote typically attributed to Eleanor Roosevelt, but it might go back to a 1901 autobiography by Charles Stewart, in which he discusses more generally how that general principle isn't a rule, but it's a general principle about the preoccupation of great minds, reminding me that even though Job is surrounded by people who are simply making his situation worse, they are not distracting him to the point where he has become preoccupied with people. On the other hand, his friends, even though they are trying to prove him unwise in his responses, even though it's just Job arrayed against them, they more and more over these next few chapters are going to clearly become preoccupied more and more with Job and less with God. And the more and more they get in their feelings in their response to Job, the less and less wise their responses seem to get. Whereas Job, no matter how offended he gets by the people around him, no matter how much he thinks that God is attacking him, he still stays focused on the fact that he's got unanswered questions. And even though his friends have not yet caught on to the fact that they don't have the answer, Job is able to identify the fact that their answers aren't making sense while he turns his attention consistently back to God, which is one of the reasons why from time to time we get back into the habit of saying God's best to you as you go forward in him. This time, hopefully learning from Job's wisdom in not allowing the noise around him to distract him from getting the answers that he still needed. Understanding that as bleak as it seemed, God was about to answer, reminding us of one of our favorite passages from James chapter 1. "If any of us lacks wisdom, and we do, ask God who gives generously, yet without doubting." And so, God willing, Job can provide an example of the ways in which we can tune out the unhealthy noise that can cause us to doubt in ways that might get in the way of God actually providing our answers.